One of the major fuel sources of this effect is counterfactual thinking. That is a psychological concept that describes the human tendency to create possible, using that term loosely, alternatives to events that have already occurred. So what happened is relegated to the back burner in favor of alternatives. These alternatives always seem more exciting. There are certain factors that fuel this way of thinking. These factors are fodder for mismemory and the belief that something is different from how it is remembered. In our day and age of blame, this so-called effect is the perfect scapegoat for the marriage between culpability and the following components. As not just a skeptic but wholehearted denier of this effect, I want to go through these factors with a spirit of Occam's razor, while deconstructing some popular examples of it. Examples will demonstrate one of these factors, maybe a combination, or all of them. Number 1. Truncation, revisions, typography errors or edits of original sources leading to confusion, such as what we will see with Star Wars. In the case of Ford or Volkswagen, for example, errors resulting from the typographic process was common in newspaper pressing. Everything from void bleed by shallow typeface to misalignment where letter type was known to be quote-unquote off its feet. Shallow typeface creates ink voids that smear or altogether leave out nuance. The Ford emblem pigtail loop, for example, or the Volkswagen emblem divider would be marred or filled in your common advert. Not always, of course. Misalignment of letter type meant off-positioning or worse, the surface of the letter or object would not fully meet the paper surface, leaving voids or blemishes in the print. One can find more information about this in the book Newspaper Typography by Hartley E. Jackson. Number 2. Confusing the facts, conflation, oversight, and mistakes. In their not-so-sincere efforts, the Mandela Effect believers don't pay attention to detail, sometimes missing the obvious answers and other times purposely editing or twisting details for their agenda. Funny enough, this habit is a major contributor to supporting silly ideas and beliefs. The more holes one leaves, the more bewilderment one can create, and the easier it is to fill those holes with bullshit. Also, people who are responsible for content in one form or another, even administratively, make errors. These errors also spur lasting memories we assume to be law. The comical aspect of it is how inconsequential, unofficial pop culture is also used as evidence. They'll say, for example, I remember it as Captain Crunch. It's definitely Captain Crunch. It's not Cap Hen, because Captain Crunch was in the lyrics of that band I used to listen to growing up. Apart from how ridiculous that is to constitute proof, all is a matter of perspective. For them, it's proof supporting Mandela Effect. For the reasonable person, it's proof the error has been shared and lurking for some time. Of course, confusing the facts also includes assuming something has changed when it hasn't at all. Number 3. Preemptive dissemination of incorrect information by influential individuals. Suggestibility, rumors, communal influences. James Earl Jones is recorded on video saying his line from Star Wars incorrectly while referencing a specific original script that we will also see. Misinformation can also be propagated by the viewers and fans. After all, many of these iconic things were experienced by young children. Pronunciation comes into play. Just saying something a certain way, and it's sticking with us. I like the comparison to the game telephone. Misquotations that are never corrected are a big culprit. What, you think as a Mandela Effect believer this is unique? Check out the list of misquotations of all time. Number 4. Crisscrossing of different cultural iconic things, such as Wayne's World and Field of Dreams, no matter the sequence, supplanting one aspect for another. Just to emphasize, sequence is not an issue here, since this specific focus on the question of he or they will come is after the fact of both movies. Not to mention, when there are other variables that prime the brain for mismemory, another variable can come along and further drive the memory into the wrong direction. Adaptations and varying renditions may, interestingly enough, adopt misquotations or non-original content that has been shaped by the audience over time, further still adding to confusion. The audience can even influence the memory of the individual part of the original thing. Number 5. Confabulation. I'm not convinced this serves as a blanket explanation, at least not for every single example. Basically, confabulation is defined as the replacement of a gap in a person's memory by a falsification that he or she believes to be true. I'm not too sure that these people are replacing a gap in memory with a falsification that is created right then and there. They have memories just of the wrong thing, and this is different than filling in gaps of memory in the moment because the true memory is missing. For the most part, I think these people are having a genuine memory. However, when information is confounded from the start, exposed to bias, and generally mixed up, how do you extricate that from a person's memory? Furthermore, how could you convince them that they are conjuring misinformation instead when it is their personal experience with the wrong information that has created the said memory? It's almost impossible. Even with evidence, such as in my Star Wars example video, people were still in denial because of the emotional experience of, "Luke, I am your father." This was technically said in part. With further exacerbating the confusion, James Earl Jones repeated the line in the movie differently from the original script we're aware of, and later recounted the line incorrectly. Subculture perpetuated that wrong information through time. So, instead of confabulation, I prefer conviction to wrong information. They have been convinced by influential ideas or by mechanisms of bias. I still think the dissemination of wrong information and the numerous suggestive factors are the main culprits. It isn't to say that some confabulation or bad memory is not at play here. I mean, just the spelling mistakes alone, where I see people put together comments, articles, or videos, shows how we don't pay attention and gloss over detail. At any rate, mismemory can be used here more sufficiently, but I'm not a fan of confabulation or bad memory as one blanket explanation. Therefore, it isn't necessarily collective bad memory, but collective mismemory. A false memory, however, can absolutely apply, not to the general shared memory about something, but possibly in the details of how one thinks they remember something. In fact, you can observe this by subtle attempts at persuasion. The Mandela Effect believer tells us of a specific personal account of an experience with something they claim has changed. They will likely include a quirky detail to instill the sense of specificity and notion that what they're claiming is undeniably true. Something like, "I know without a doubt that it used to be Looney Tunes with 2 O's because I remember watching the script writing in the animation." In those personal accounts in support of the general shared mismemory, I think personal false memories or confabulation are very much a possibility. This interesting article of thousands is about false memories. Number 6 is the idea that Mandela Effect in its sensationalism is feeding itself. A bandwagon effect takes over. Mass hysteria sets the tone and results in the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. In the past, if one were shown a product label that was well known for years and suddenly appears different, it would have been casually dismissed. This is not due to indolence, but one reasonably recognizing that humans change things. Now, say you know about Mandela Effect, and let's say you haven't really thought of its implications and therefore its built-in contradictions. Consequently, you then take it at face value, since actualizing those contradictions and implications debunks the bunk. You are now on high alert and may even consider yourself in a higher consciousness, something, of course, lauding like that. So there's our formula. Hyper-awareness of a suggested idea, plus implications not thought through, plus reinterpreting change as something else, feeding into the presumption and illusion of the Mandela Effect. A recipe for disaster. There might be individuals with no memory of something either way, but to be part of something bigger than themselves, sensationalism could inspire a confabulation. Number 7. Cognitive dissonance, inattentional blindness, and mismemory, all leading to illogical sequences or plots. The Life cereal commercial with Mikey comes to mind here. The everyday task of focusing on our endeavors with blinders on, overlooking the details around us, what's called inattentional blindness, we will see with the JFK example. Number 8. The use of logo or brand revisions, renditions, and variations, as well as the principles of incongruity as a predictive marketing tool. Counterfeiting and aftermarket units presenting with disparity also adding to confusion. A common business practice to test marketability and experiment with how a product's attractiveness can be influenced by layout and design. Also, sometimes a product name simply changes because they want to change it. It's certainly not spooky. With a specific example such as Chick-fil-A, we can examine human error and the fact that it is anticipated in marketing as a driving force behind the theory of incongruity and perceiver bias. With Ford, for example, they've introduced several logo changes throughout the years, and some lingered even among the official updated logo. But apart from that, counterfeits and aftermarket variations feed our assumptions. Manufacturers are of course protective of their intellectual property and branding. Counterfeiters aside, even though they certainly contribute to the confusion what's considered official, if aftermarket or third-party companies go over a certain percentage tolerance in mimicking logo design, they can be sued. The obvious spin-off, for example, can be seen in the now popular VW emblem that is being touted as Mandela Effect evidence. This VW emblem has no divider between the V and W and has a sharp, small inverted triangle structure at the top of it. This is a good example of either an aftermarket piece, possibly trying to avoid litigation, or simply a counterfeit with its own variation. Number 9. Confusing supernatural or phenomenon with occultism. These are not interchangeable terms. Occultism is intriguing, brain-teasing, puzzling, somewhat mysterious, or a clandestine form of communication, but nevertheless of our doing. It is another language, another syntax underneath Truncation language to convey an idea, agenda, or plan. PSYOPs or special groups can use occultism or subliminal programming. Again, interesting, not magical or otherworldly, unless of course we reserve words like magical as hyperbole to describe these mental concoctions. Problem is, words have landed in the wrong minds that convert these concepts as literal portrayal of fantastical proportions. Numerology in its use comes to mind. Rather than acknowledging human-made, elaborate systems of hidden meaning and ideas as well as descriptions of patterns in human life, occultism is deemed a literal manifestation of otherworldly powers. And usually the fearmongers like to call it evil. Ultimately, belief has no value or meaning until we give it such, and even then it is of our creation. All these contributing factors fuel error. These errors are then preserved and mummified through time as memory. Our self-importance just can't bear to admit error or confusion when it comes to memory and human habits. And it's reached this severely embarrassing apex. If I were to imagine aliens exist and they have visited our Earth, I'd also think they quietly snuck right the hell out once they got winds of the latest fad belief. Before I proceed with deconstructing examples, I am going to expound on why the Mandela Effect as an idea of reality is bogus by briefly exposing its flaws. In essence, it becomes quite simple and equally clear that it is a fallacy on the part of many individuals. Lack of insight deciphering these flaws makes one vulnerable to believe the idea to be true.